Cool, and we are live. So it's Troy Francis, and I'm joined by a very special guest this evening, Erin or Straighter Aid.
Hi.
Welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having me, Troy.
Not at all, not at all. Well, it's good to catch up. Finally, it's been a little while, hasn't it, since we met in Miami on Fresh and Fit?
Battled it out on Fresh and Fit.
Absolutely, yeah. And
so what is your affiliation with Fresh and Fit? You know, like I feel like you're the one bringing like the studies and the data, kind of the gentleman's red pillar, as opposed to like Sneeko and Myron and their other co-host.
Well, I've known them for a while, basically, because how did we first meet? Well, basically, because I do a show called Rule Zero on Saturdays with Rollo Tomasi, and there's various other sort of red pill type content creators on there. And at one point, Myron was on the show for a while, and then he left the show, but he'd set up his own YouTube channel, which was initially talking about fitness. Then he started talking about dating for a while, and then it sort of he met up with Fresh, and then it kind of morphed into Fresh and Fit. And so I'd known him literally since before he had, he had a few thousand subscribers. And he'd been on my channel several times and so on. So we'd known each other for quite a long time. And then I got to know Fresh as well, got on with them pretty well. And so, they've been kind enough to have me on their channel when I've been over in Miami and stuff. And, obviously they've gone massive. I mean, they're over 1 million subscribers now, so they're absolutely huge. But as you saw, they're personable guys. I mean, obviously you're on the different side of the argument to them on many issues. But well, you met Myron, didn't you? I don't think you met Fresh, but Myron is he's a friendly guy. So I've known them for a long time, I suppose is the answer.
Yeah, the personal charisma, I totally understand of all these figures of like, Myron, even Sneeko to a certain extent, and yourself, but it's just all the political positions that I disagree with. Well, insofar as you can even consider, dating related advice to be like a political thing. I don't know. How do you look at it that way?
Personally, not really, no, but it kind of became like that. And so my take on all of this, right? I got into this space or whatever you want to call it because I wanted to date. I wanted to meet more girls and whatever. This is going back a while, and there were websites talking about what approach to use if you go and meet a girl. What kind of things to say, confidence.
Just
tips,
say it. What is it? Pickup artist? Is it Rush V?
All that kind of stuff. Yeah, there was all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so there was like The Game by Neil Strauss, and then there was Rush V, and there was all that pickup artist stuff, right? So that was in like the earlier 2000s, and then it seemed to morph into this more political thing. So you'd get these, and Rollo Tomasi had his website, and there were other blogs and things at the time, and increasingly the comments got more politicized, and it was more and more right wing kind of rhetoric. And I think the way it seemed to me was, if you imagine the red pill, people say, well, the red pill is understanding women and it's understanding the sexual marketplace, the realities of the sexual marketplace. It's not this pretty Disney-fied thing anymore. And then people were saying, but if you take the red pill about that, then you need to take the red pill about politics. What's really going on in the world? And that's how it sort of morphed into this traditionalist kind of thing. And then it came to prior to the election of Trump and the whole thing of the ascendancy of Trump. And suddenly all these people are on board with Trump. It's like, yeah, man, Trump's, he's based, he's telling it like it is. And it became this very politicized thing, which I personally don't think it needs to be. Because I personally don't think politics, obviously politics comes into dating, it comes into everything, but it doesn't need to.
Yeah, you're separating like the social aspect of it from what does, exactly, like trying to pick up men and women necessarily have to do with like fiscal policy? Unless you want to take it there, yeah.
Exactly. But it became this sort of, and I think it's like social media, as we were talking about before we came on, has become more and more polarized, hasn't it, as time's gone on? And it seems like you've got to be on one side of a fence or the other side of a fence. And so it became almost this thing in a lot of the men's online dating advice space, was like, all right, well, you're into this dating stuff, so therefore you should be right wing. You should be a Republican. You should be supporting Trump. But if you're not, why not? You're a cuck. And I never saw it as being like that, really. I don't see why. Like, what's it got to do with, if you want to learn how to go to the to the club or the barbecue and meet a girl or something, what's that really got to do with?
So you're saying being red pill is nonpartisan?
I think it's partisan for many people.
But ideally, you would think it would be, because you think like this stuff is universally
well,
applicable.
yeah. I mean, if you look at people like Rollo Tomassi, and there's another guy called Ryan Stone who's on Rule Zero as well. He's like a writer, blogger, whatever. He works a lot with Rollo, and I mean, if you listen to guys like them, they will say that the red pill in inverted commas it's not political. It's about observing.
It's reality.
They will say, yeah. Now, you might have issues with that, but they will say, look, this is what it is. It's observing reality as it is. This is how women behave. This is how men behave. This is how the whole thing works. It's not about being on the side of Trump or any of these people. It's just about observing human nature and describing it. So personally, for me, I mean, but that's not to say that many other people haven't taken the red pill in a partisan direction, because they absolutely have. And I mean, if you look at, probably most creators in the space are on the Republican side of things, I would say.
You think so? That's what I suspected. But even in the debate that I had on Fresh and Fit, when Myron's there, it's one policy position, but Myron is there saying that, like, surprisingly, I'm pro-choice.
Yeah,
and that had me wondering, like, it might actually just be that some of his views on dating, and like social issues, I would categorize as like socially reactionary. But as far as like the other positions, he very well may be for like a higher minimum wage, or paid family leave, and all these other positions. We didn't really ever get into it. But I wondered, like, have you ever heard of the creator tree of logic?
I don't think I have, actually.
She's a small conservative creator.
Okay.
And she was accusing Sneeko of dodging her, because she was saying, if you'll notice that these guys are not actually they're not as conservative as people assume. They have some socially reactionary positions or socially conservative positions, but she's like, even then, they don't really, like, a lot of the red pill guys are not living by their values. Like, they would not be drinking as much as they were, or promoting like sexual promiscuity, if they were actually embracing traditional conservatism. They would be encouraging young men to get married. They would be encouraging young men to have kids. And if anything, they go on these dating shows and they're saying, don't get into a marriage quickly. Don't get baby trapped. Like, avoid these even socially conservative positions. So she was saying he will debate liberal, like, Sneeko, Myron, Fresh and Fit, the entire crew. Like, the red pillars want to debate liberals and stuff like that, but they actually don't want to debate true conservative women like herself, who she was like, I'm married. I'm not smoking. I'm not drinking. I don't party. Like, I don't do any of those things, because I think that's kind of that's incompatible with being able to call yourself like a conservative,
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And actually, I mean, if you look at say something like Twitter, where you can sort of, obviously, people in short form will talk about their views, so you can get an idea of where a lot of people sit. There are also a number of what we would call trads, really, the male and female, and there are male, like, trad content creators who are basically saying, look at all this degeneracy going on. You guys should, just get married, find a good girl, get married, settle down, have lots and lots of babies, and populate the world, and create a strong, family,
nuclear family or something. Uphold the traditional nuclear family. Yeah, but I don't see any of these creators themselves interested in that anyway. Not that I think that, if you're going to give prescriptive advice, you necessarily have to like live by it to a T, but I would think that like it would generally map onto it. But a lot of these guys they're young, single, unmarried, like they don't want to have kids themselves. They are embracing non-monogamy. Even at certain contexts.
There was one guy on Twitter, I think he's pivoted now a bit, and he's talking about sort of more e-commerce or copywriting skills or something like that. But he had 9 kids. He's married. He's got 9 children. So for a while, he was banging the drum of like, this is what it is. Have a family. It's, blah, blah, blah. So there are people who are banging that drum. But I agree with you, not everybody. And there's a slightly uneasy position with people who are they talk about dating, they talk about sex, they talk about relationships, whatever. I mean, the classic example is if you look at the Tates, because, on the one hand, obviously the Tates lifestyle is well known, Bugattis, lots of hot women, etc., all of that. But equally, well, and of course now Andrew has converted to Islam. So that's another thing. But you know, there was also a strand of the message which was, look at all this degeneracy that's going on, isn't it terrible? So and there's this slightly uneasy sort of grey area with some people, I think, some content creators, where on the what they want to kind of cover all bases. So they want to kind of cover that, yeah, you can have lots of sex and party and stuff, but equally they want to get their foot in the trad.
It comes off to me as pure idolatry of the Tate brothers, because I don't understand, you know, usually even some Red Pill creators, like I was watching a live stream with one, I'm sure you know, Playing with Fire.
Yeah.
So he has content that is trying to capture like Tate viewers, and it was just narrowly defending some of his policy positions, but it's just stuff like, you know, he believes young men should have like self-accountability and fitness and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is advice that is nothing new and very novel. Like, why does this man have to be cited, especially given, you know, he's not been convicted, but he's, you know, allegedly accused of all of these crimes related to like human trafficking and stuff like that. I'm like, if you need a strong male role model who's going to tell men to go to the gym and to take self-responsibility, I'm like, why does it have to be Andrew Tate? This is advice that you could get from like so many different men.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't think that sort of type of advice is pretty boilerplate, really, isn't it? I mean, there's, you know, so yeah, go to the gym. I mean, people have been saying lift online for years. Yeah, bro, you should be lifting. You know, there's, you know, work hard, get up early, sort out your shit. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing particularly novel about any of that kind of advice. But you're right. I mean, there has been this. And one of the criticisms that gets leveled against the space has always been, well, on the one hand, you're saying you want to meet, you know, look at all these 304s, all these women are sleeping around, they're all hoes, blah, blah, blah. But equally, men are, you know, in the space are teaching other men to go and do that. So how is that fair? How does that compute?
How do you think they square the circle?
I think, well, look, here's the thing, right? I think that different individuals have different ideas. The problem with looking at it as one homogenous thing is that it kind of isn't, because that many people within the space have different ideas. I mean, my take on all of this was a lot more libertarian earlier on. I mean, I was a lot more sort of like, well, sod it, you know, the world's going to hell in a handcart anyway, so why not just party and have a good time while we're here? Mine was a much more selfish sort of almost
anti-establishment.
Yeah. You could almost say nihilistic kind of view of things. Now, as it is, as an individual, and I'm speaking only for myself here, I've sort of calmed down a lot with that kind of stuff. So that's not really, and I'd always balance that with the self-improvement message anyway, because if you want to date, whether you want to have a long-term girlfriend or you want to meet, you know, casual partners, you've got to also do the self-improvement work. So I've always had that. But almost as a jokey sort of a pose for a while, I was really putting myself up against, particularly on Twitter, up against these sort of boring traditionalists who were saying, oh, I'll get married and settle down and have a white picket fence and 15 kids. I was saying, well, none of that sounds very fun. Why not just party and move to Hawaii and, you know, kind of have a good time?
I think
partly to piss those people off. And also partly because there's a part of me that also believes that, because I do think, and look, I mean, people can make their own choices. I don't really mind what anybody else does. But I think that with some of the people who are pushing the traditional conservative family message, I think that can be, I think it's not right for everybody. And I think that can be a damaging message in some cases, because you get some kid who's like, you know, 24 and thinks, oh, shit, I better get married then. But a lot of marriages don't last. A lot of marriages are not happy. A lot of, you know, divorce happens a lot. And that is then damaging to these notional children that they're all talking about. So I think just telling guys that is the answer, I think, is irresponsible as well.
Well, even with that, like I was asking myself, like, is strictly looking at like divorce rates even the best way to really gauge whether or not a relationship is meaningful to somebody? Because there's like a high divorce rate is bad. But on the other hand, I'm even skeptical of the couples that stay together, because there are many, you know, marriage is an entire institution, and there are just financial realities to dissolving one. So even if you are ready to exit your marriage, the reality is that like even an amicable divorce is going to cost in excess of like several $1,000s. If you have children, that's something that's going to pollute that, you know, the disillusionment of that arrangement. And so when I hear the red pill guys just like rush into this thing, I'm like, do you really know what you're getting into? Like this is something that it's very easy to get yourself in, and it's very hard to get yourself out.
Well, yeah, I mean, my take on all of this has always been, because so what gets talked about a lot in the red pill space is women are hypergamous. That, you know, that is to say they want the best possible male genes.
So I've heard.
They want to get the Chad, you know, whatever. And so women cheat. You know, this is the big reveal of the red pill. It's, oh my God, women actually cheat, you know, because we were all sold this lie as youngsters that, you know, women are sugar and spice and all things nice. You know, she's a Disney princess.
Clearly we're not.
She's not a sexual being, and you know, and now shock horror, you know, it's been ripped away, and oh my God, they cheat, they have sex, they'll do the dirty on guys and things like that, which obviously, yes, that's true, but my contention though is that fundamentally I think monogamy is difficult for everybody. I think it's difficult for men. I think it's also difficult for women, particularly over the long term. You know, particularly if you're looking at a 10, 15, 25, 30 year whatever marriage. I mean, it's very, very hard. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's funny because a lot of these red pill guys, they go through that phase of spouting all of that stuff about hypergamy and, oh, she might walk out on you for the pool boy and whatever. And then a couple of years later, they go, right, now I'm going to get married. And it's like, well,
they found the one.
Like, how does
how does that compute? Yeah, like
exactly.
like were you lying the entire time, or have you really just changed your mind on it? Did you find that one person, you know? Like, but even, you know, does the red pill ideology really promote this idea of like finding the one, finding a soulmate or something like that?
I don't know. I don't think it does. Like a classic red pill, as far as I can see, would say no, there isn't a one. And I think many people can agree on that. You know, like this, however many people on the planet.
The likelihood that you are going to find somebody who is in lockstep with all of your like major life goals and can provide everything to you, I'm thinking like this is completely unrealistic. Like, even if you could have this arrangement, why would you want this? You know, like that is what friends are for. That's what families are for. Like, this idea that you're going to expect to find somebody who you're just completely compatible with in every respect, you know, is just so, it's something that's not even worth trying to find, right?
Well, yeah, and it's just this statistically sort of absurd, isn't it? That one woman or one man that you meet in your local town is somehow magically the one, when there's
like proximity is going to be the thing.
Yeah,
that would really, like, oh, that's your soulmate. Your soulmate just happens to be in the same city as you.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like it's very limiting.
I think so in my experience, I think there are certainly people that one is more compatible with than others. You know, we can be attracted to a lot of people, and then of those people, some of them, you know, we might date for a bit and it kind of works out, kind of doesn't work out. And then there are others, you know, a smaller pool who, you know, there is that compatibility there, and you could make a relationship work, and you can probably make a longish term relationship work. But the problem always seems to be that sort of ennui sets in after a while. You know, I mean, after the initial honeymoon period, there's that massive attraction, that massive burst of whatever, you know, the sexual kind of side of things. That sort of tapers off, and then people start to get a bit bored with one another. And the difficulty we've got now is that, for good or for ill, socially, there's no real incentive for marriages to stay together, is there? You know,
no, I feel like now it's probably easier to cheat than ever, because there are just so many different avenues that you can cheat, more than ever before. But it's also harder to keep it a secret because of the same reason.
Yeah.
Like, with every avenue that's going to be available to you, that's just one more way for your partner to catch you.
Yeah.
I don't know that you know, I think people get into marriage seeing it as like, this is a thing that's going to provide me with stability. And then a few years in, they're realizing just how confining it is. And the younger that you did it, you know, the less partners and experiences that you had, the more likely you're going to just be tempted by the unknown. You know, the grass is always greener. And it's not even so much that you don't desire your partner anymore, but you just find yourself questioning, like, did I settle down too quickly? You know?
Well, and people would say, people in the red pill space would say, well, that's something that particularly happens with women. And they always pull out this statistic that 70% of divorces
are initiated by women.
So we'd have to look at the...
I like, what is the... I believe it, but what's the citation? Is it just going to be irreconcilable differences? Is it infidelity? Can you list more than one?
I think I think the main one is irreconcilable differences.
So even if I grant that's true, which I don't even know if that's true, like what do you think the main reason actually is in those cases?
I suspect that it's well, okay, look. I mean, to be fair, you could say you mentioned infidelity there. I mean, there is an argument to say, well, maybe the men were behaving so badly that the women had no choice but to leave. So there is that. I suspect a lot of it, though, is to do with the loss of those initial feelings. You know, the loss of the initial butterflies. It gets a bit boring. It gets a bit of a chore. And then the woman's thinking, well, actually, you know, maybe I could have done better. That's a somewhat biased way of looking at it, though, I concede. And I mean, you know, we'd have to, you know, I don't know what studies are available really to flesh that out. Because, I mean, no doubt there are a multitude of reasons. But I do think that boredom is a big one.
Just boredom?
Well, I mean,
I don't know that boredom could be like, is it that strong a force that somebody's going to be willing to upend their life and completely like dissolve a marriage out of boredom or lack of interest in their partner?
Well, what if you were married to someone for 15 years and you know there's no sex, the sex is gone, you find them perhaps almost, I don't know, so repulsive, but you know you don't have those feelings for them anymore. It's got very sort of mundane and work a day, and you know it's just all about looking after the kids and coming home, or you know going to work and then all this kind of crap. I mean, there must be a temptation for at least some of these women to think, well, actually, maybe there's something better for me out there, you know?
So you think, like, even in the instances that, you know, I'm not trying to necessarily justify infidelity, but you can be the victim of infidelity, but you're not necessarily the victim of the marriage overall. So do you think that, like, if a woman is cheating, do you think that she is driven to cheat because her partner is not meeting her like sexual and emotional needs, or do you think that she's stepping out of that relationship for more selfish reasons? That even, you know, these husbands could be just 10 of 10, and that would have happened regardless because of, you know, some supposed nature of women or something like that.
Well, she might be stepping out because she feels that her sexual and emotional needs aren't being met. But all I would say to that is that, you know, when you're looking at a long-term relationship over, as I say, like, you know, 10, 15 years or more, there are going to be times when those things dip, aren't there? Just by I mean, I'm not saying there should be, but I think just through the nature of life itself, you know, there are going to be times where maybe the guy's tired. I mean, actually, I read somewhere the other day. Again, I don't know if this is true. This isn't some statistically validated thing, but somebody saying, well, actually, lack of male sex drive is one of the biggest reasons for marriages to split up. So it could actually be that the guys are pulling away from sex for whatever reason. You know, they're tired, they're stressed, they got loads of stuff on at work and blah, blah, blah. And then the women are getting fed up because they're not getting the, you know, the physical kind of component that they need. And then the women are thinking, well, sod this, and they're moving on. So
if it's an issue of like male impotence or something like that, wouldn't that still apply to men? If it's applying to men broadly, or it was just finding that men who are married?
Men who were married, but it was some
because if it's just like men, if there's a trend of that men broadly, then why would you cheat? if it's like my husband's impotent or whatever, like unless you know getting like signing that contract like instantly snaps and like something happens or whatever, like wouldn't all men be spoiled, right?
No, I don't think the implication was that every man, you know, in general is suffering from
not in general, but that there's a higher proclivity for that to be the case. I don't think that it would be something that's unique to married men only. Like if you knew that like you know there's rising impotence among like a male population, it would have to just apply broadly to every single man. You wouldn't be able to select for like I don't think like seeing marriage as like a relevant variable, you know.
Well, yes, but I mean, the for a start, it's not just impotence. I don't think. I mean, impotence is one of the factors, but it could equally be, you know, to put it in other words, he's just not in the mood. It may not be physically that he's become impotent. It's just that he's very tired. He's very stressed. You know, he's not feeling it, or he's lost attraction for her for whatever reason. I don't know that the woman who's on the point of exiting that marriage is going to think, oh, well, maybe every other guy in my city is going to be like this as well, so I may as well stay put. I don't think emotionally it would really work like that, would it? I think particularly, I mean, if the woman's going to go and cheat and she's got another person in the frame, for example, then she might think, well, I don't think I'm going to be experiencing this problem with that particular guy.
Right.
So I take your point, but I don't know whether the emotional decision at the moment of leaving or making the choice to leave is going to be really coloured by that, because I think it's going to be more emotional than logical.
Do you think that it's the familiarity is really the only thing that's kind of like deadening the attraction, or do you think that the couples who are getting married are taking each other for granted and they're the ones kind of contributing to the circumstance, or do you really just think that like marriage itself kind of just is a breeding ground for that sort of dynamic between yourself and your partner?
Well, I think domesticity is a breeding ground for it. Not necessarily marriage, but I mean, marriage often usually means that the people live together. I think living together, in my experience, and my experience is very limited of living with women, actually. I've lived with, I think, 2 in my entire life. One of them was back when I was at college years and years ago, so I can't remember. How'd that go? Terrible. Both of them were terrible. No, when I was at college and I was partying a lot, I was drinking a lot and blah, blah, blah. She moved in I think she was there for about a year. It was one of those stupid things where she had some problem with her accommodation. She came and moved into my place for a while, and it was just, it went downhill very quickly. And then in more recent years, I had somebody coming to live with me, and she only stayed for about 6 months. And that also I found it very constraining, and I wasn't happy, and there were various other weird dynamics going on. So we brought that to an end. But the point is that I think when you put yourself in a domestic situation with a partner, it is very, very difficult to keep the initial thing. What is the initial thing that brought you together? It's attraction, isn't it? It's that spark. It's that physical plus mental and emotional, whatever. But
do you think it's that? I don't always think it's that. I think there are a lot of relationships of convenience. I think that there are a lot of people who basically cling on to the first person that lets them. They start affairs with coworkers. They have a friends with benefits that they just kind of allow to, like, well, we're sleeping together. We're spending more and more time together. Doesn't it just make sense that we escalate this or whatever? There's a simultaneous desire to want to have the freedom to do so or whatever. But realistically, like, will people take it upon themselves to put themselves out there? I think that seems to be, especially, young boys, young men who are attracted to like the red pill and, pickup artistry, just seem in general to have difficulty maintaining just, general social relationships. And then they suddenly want to be able to find out, like, how do I attract like dozens of women? They haven't even learned how to really select for friends, because again, I think people just kind of become friends with people around them or default to relationships with people around them, assuming that, why not? I think like monogamy really used to mean that one person for life, and now I think it just means for a lot of people one person at a time. Which is, we've kind of strayed away from like the original definition of monogamy, but that's fine. And it used to really just be like an arrangement. We need to, like, men would do it, right? So they could know that I'm raising my own kids and who's going to get the cows, right, after we die. But now it's like we've maintained this, I guess, kind of archaic institution at a time where, a lot of other social dynamics have changed. Like, is that something worth preserving and enforcing in the same way? Like, shouldn't it have evolved a little bit? Because, it used to be one just of practicality. And now people that's kind of shifted into like, no, this one person for me, this one-on-one dynamic, that needs to be, indicative of like my love for somebody. When before, again, like it started off more as like an economic arrangement.
Yeah, well, it absolutely was, wasn't it? And I mean, if you read that book, Sex at Dawn, which has also many detractors, but is a study of monogamy, basically. The contention of the author, and I forget the author's name, but I can link it underneath or whatever later. But the contention is basically that the monogamy, in the way that we know it now, came out of the agricultural revolution, because people suddenly had land and they had work that needed to be done, and they had assets to pass on when they die, and so on and so forth. And so monogamy and marriage came as part of that sort of commercial enterprise. Prior to that, he argues, polyamory was all the rage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are people who push back on that, because there are people who are, we were talking before we came on, I think, about traditionalists, you know, in this space, and trads, and like, no, get married, one woman, white picket fence, all of that. And there are some of those people who will really push back on the science behind this book and say, no, it was never actually like that. You know, monogamy was always a natural, inherent human thing. I personally, I don't think it was. I don't think. I just fundamentally don't.
Well, do you think it's even productive to look at somebody's predisposition to monogamy or non-monogamy as something that's biologically driven or socially driven? Because I was asking myself this before I even came on.
I think,
you know, we've accepted that like sexuality is something that is like largely out of our control. It's going to be influenced obviously by social factors, but you know, typically if you're born and you find yourself to be like straight, there's no converting of that, right? Conversion therapy is like pseudoscience, so can't really be flipped either way. But I guess I could see people being resistant to the idea of like somebody's being predisposed to monogamy or non-monogamy simply because they look at somebody's decision to step out as just that, like that's a decision, that's a choice. It's a very lazy explanation to say like men or women are biologically driven to not be able to be honest with their partner.
Well, okay, so do you think then that are you then saying perhaps some people might be more predisposed towards monogamy and other people less predisposed?
Well, I found myself asking that because it almost seems like
thought.
I mean, it's hard. Like I have to bring up infidelity, even though I feel like the conversation about infidelity versus, you know, monogamy and non-monogamy is kind of a separate one. But the thoroughfare that I see here is that like, you know, infidelity is as widely reviled as it is practiced. You know, like the same amount of people. Like I think it was a poll that I saw conducted. I'm not going to be able to recall it off the top of my head, but it was like 97% of the participants that they asked would want to know if their partner was cheating on them and having an affair. But that's almost the same percentage said that if they were doing that, they would lie to their partner about it. So, you know, I think people don't realize that there's a broad spectrum between just wholesale accepting monogamy and marriage versus, you know, going so far as polygamy and having like multiple wives. Like sometimes all it takes is just kind of a little bit of relaxing of the boundaries that you've set for your relationship for everything to change.
Yeah, I suppose the reason for the broad question, you know, is monogamy natural or not? Is it inherent in the human species? I think the reason that's an interesting question to ask is because I'm curious myself to know, is it that, say we were able to prove somehow that yes, monogamy is natural and this is the default setting, and because of the degeneracy of society and everything, we've moved away from that. That would be kind of an interesting thing to know, I think, because then we could say, okay, so actually this is our natural state. So maybe there are ways in which we can move back to it, or if we could prove definitively that actually monogamy is not inherent in human beings, really, then we could maybe say, okay, well, we accept that. So no, let's look at other models that could work well. That's why I think the question is interesting. I don't know how to find the answer.
Is that the contention with the book that you're citing? That people don't like that he's appealing to?
So the contention in the book is basically that monogamy is not. It's wrong to say it's not natural, but it's not. What's another way of putting it? It's not our inherent state. It's not our preferred inherent state over the long term. You know, so we can be monogamous. You know, you can make a decision to be with somebody and be monogamous. I mean, fine, but it's not. Actually, human beings were more driven towards polygamy
or polyamory or something like that.
And now society actually has enforced this kind of idea of, you know, one man, one woman, or one partner for life thing.
Yeah, what I think of, like, if you've read the book, I assume.
Yeah.
So does he get into like the historical roots of this? Like, I kind of would think about like non-monogamy as maybe a function of like the upper class. It doesn't seem like it's really something that if you are poor, you're going to be able to meaningfully do, especially if you're relying on like, you know, if I'm applying more red pill ideology to this, like women are attracted to resources. So if you're an impoverished man, you're going to be defaulting to monogamy because you simply don't have the resources to even attract other women. But then men of the, you know, upper classes are going to have a wealth of women, you know, wealth of mistresses and a wife and, you know, girlfriends because of the amount of decadence and wealth that they enjoy. Does it touch on that at all?
He cites different. Now, it's quite a while since I've read it, so I don't remember the details. So in huge detail, but he talks about various different societies, past societies. He cites studies and says, well, look at these people; they were doing X, Y, and Z. But you're right. The guys with the most resources would have enjoyed the benefits of that.
Yeah, like the aristocracy. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and actually that is something that then gets talked about online with the black pill guys.
The nihilists, yeah. Unfortunately,
you're familiar with that whole thing of like, oh, it's all about looks, and if you're not amazing looking, if you're not a model and you're 7'5" or whatever,
yeah, like your future and destiny is determined by like a few millimeters of bone, and like your income and stuff like that. Like, there's nothing that you could do to change your circumstances. You just better accept it, roll down, and die.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so those guys, so they will say, I mean, monogamy was a mechanism by which let's say the average man, the beta male or whatever you want to call it, had a shot of at least getting a wife and being able to procreate. And their issue now, as I understand it, is that because that societal contract has broken down, and now for a start, women aren't reliant on men for resources in the same way that they were, and also marriage doesn't have the sanctity that it used to have. Now it's kind of a free for all, and so the guys who perceive themselves to be lower down in the pecking order are getting nothing, whereas the guys at the top are getting a lot more. So yeah, you're right. I think maybe they might see it as being, well, there was this golden period of monogamy when it was properly enforced up until about the 1950s or whatever.
Like a golden ratio of like all the 1s to the 1s, 2 to 2s, 8 to 8, 10 to 10 or whatever. Like, I've heard this hypothesis. I've never found it. I've never seen any empirical basis for it or whatever. It's like, it's a social hypothesis that to me, it sounds intuitively correct, but if you just push through it a little bit more, think about it for like 60 seconds more, you can find plenty of exceptions to this. Even anecdotally,
the idea that it was ever like
that there's this like natural predisposition for, again, like the 1s to go with the 1s, and like the 8s with the 8s and the 10s with the 10s or whatever. Like, I don't know that there was ever this just perfect way of looking at it, because what it even means to be a 10 is like going to have so many factors. Even historically, like the black pillars are off saying that like there used to be kind of like this natural
fairness about it,
because like we were saying, like the aristocracy, like the wealthiest man was not necessarily going to be the most attractive man, and vice versa. So even at like historically, that's not ever been the case. There's many different ways and reasons
I suppose
reasons that people are attracted to each other.
You're absolutely right. And I don't think there was ever a time when people, I mean, and how do you define it anyway? But people who are on the same level were just attracted to people on that level. I don't think that was ever the thing. But I suppose what they would argue would be, but it was regulated then, in the sense that women's sexuality or women's sexual choices were constrained, and they were basically forced to.
They were property, so.
Well,
it's a good way of coercing a woman to stay with you.
You're going to marry this bloke, and you're going to stay with him for life, or you're going to be shamed in the village and driven out of town or whatever. And and some of them seem to be misty-eyed for going back to those days, which is obviously ridiculous, and I mean would never happen anyway. But I mean, but even within that system, even if the system existed in that way, and I'm not convinced that it actually did. Certainly, if you go back to like Shakespearean times in England or Dickens and things, I'm not even sure it really existed like that even then. But even if it did, even within that system, there were still plenty of stories of infidelity. Even the woman who was married to the boring, or the low value guy, hooking up with the, with the aristocrat or whatever. I mean, there's, so there's always going to have been people trying to break out of that regardless.
What I don't understand about the black pillars is that, as far as I can surmise, I feel like there's more universal standards of beauty for women. So a woman who's beautiful in New York City is going to be beautiful in LA, is going to be beautiful in Miami, is going to be beautiful in Tokyo, Egypt, Japan, anywhere that she goes.
Yeah.
And as opposed to what constitutes male standards of beauty, way less universal. So there's like a number of things that could attract a woman to a man, and it's not necessarily going to be extremely physically dependent, or like it's not just going to be all Eurocentric standards of beauty and looks. Like, of course, there's always going to be this like mainstream male beauty standard that doesn't deviate too much from, physical fitness, being tall, being young. But as far as the hype, but as far as it looks like, that's just media. Those are like curated images and media. You can't really look to it to say like, is this what really women desire, right? Because there are only so many golden gods to go around. Okay, like there's only so many men who look like this. The majority of the most popular, I think, Eurocentric standard of beauty, it's like to be, again, like over 6 feet, to be tall, to be blonde, to be ripped. That is not the majority of the world. And yet the majority of men are not single. They will meet eventually like a woman in their life. So I'm so confused as to like why they think like, oh, if I don't reach this standard or whatever, I'm not going to find it. I'm like, do you realize the majority of the world is not white? That's already a minority of people. And yet, they're managing to find success.
Well, I mean, but they would say, and like I'm now being forced into the to argue for the black pill. But I mean, I've seen these guys saying this is the problem because all the women are fighting basically for the top 5-10% of guys, but
that's not who do they end up with? That's not who they end up with.
Yeah, but
there's only so many. Again, like this is a minority of people. There's only so many of those men to go around. And if you're saying exactly, that, like, it's to me, that's the contradiction. Is that women only want this type of men, but they're fucking all these guys. It's like there's only so many like Greek gods to go around.
No, but they say that women are fighting over these top 5% men until they hit the age of maybe 30, 35 or whatever, and then they go.
They settle, right? They find a beta male or whatever.
They settle for a lower standard god.
But she cheats.
Yeah, but she's not really happy with that guy, and then she goes and cheats or whatever. That's what they would say. Or they end up as a cat lady and they're drinking wine.
Oh, right, like a saddled spinster or whatever. Yes, if you're single, that means that you can't have fun.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, but no. What you're saying, I agree with you on this because. And this is, as somebody who tries to help guys with dating and, in terms of my own experience and with the experience of people that, my friends and people I've worked with, it's all nonsense. This idea that for a start, you have to be a Chad. And secondly, that there's one standard that meets all. And also that things like interpersonal skills and confidence and the way that you come across to other people don't count at all. And it's only about looks. It's only about those millimeters of bone is obviously absurd. But these guys believe it and they're in that echo chamber. So I'm with you on that, but I mean they would say that you are, as a woman, you are either you're saying this to make it sound more palatable,
right.
Or
I'm
not,
coping.
Yeah, or you're not really aware of what you actually desire, and all that kind of stuff. So
it's not a cope though, because I can't really think again. Like I can't find like a consistent thread. Maybe I'm speaking anecdotally. Of something that the majority of women that I know find attractive. Like I don't know if you've seen this. This is like way more Zoomer tendencies, but I'm thinking like on TikTok and like the men who are, they're making thirst straps over and stuff like that. Some of them are definitely unconventionally attractive men, or significantly older, significantly younger. And some have the like dad bod, right? And others don't. So that's why I'm like, there is so much, there's so much room for women to like view men as attractive. I don't really think it's as narrow as opposed to the beauty standards for women, which I find to be a lot more confining and strict.
Yeah, I think I
hear men, talk about liking MILFs, but I don't ever hear guys really talking about like liking, overweight women or like BBWs or whatever. Like that's like fringe stuff. As opposed to there are women who again like they're embracing like the dad bod and like men who are not even physically fit.
Well, I mean, but are they actually embracing the dad bod or not? I was having this conversation the other day, actually, because I was on a podcast in London here and we were there were some girls on the podcast, and I was asking them because in London, for example, and they were saying the same thing. They all basically said it. I said to them, look, what about physique? Is being ripped? Do you have to be ripped? And they all basically said no. I mean, there was some contention over money. Some of the girls were saying, well, actually, a guy who's in a good position in life is more attractive. There was a little bit of talk about facial looks, but in terms of being ripped, they were all like, no, it's not actually that important.
That's a male standard of beauty.
as a male standard of beauty.
Yeah, usually
But
like when
also
I
look like
see
women.
them describing like this Giga Chad or whatever, I'm like,
But
the majority of women don't, as far as I know, like are not looking for rippling abs. Like, are they complaining? No, but like, is that necessary? Like, I definitely don't think so.
do
No.
you think that these guys are then sort of superimposing a male sensibility onto women?
Absolutely. All of it is like male gaze stuff to me. It's like, find me the woman who just wishes her boyfriend spent hours at the gym at a time and is like, buying a bunch of like protein supplements and stuff and is some huge giga chad and all of that. Like when I find like when I look to just social media and I see who's trending in terms of celebrity men, it's not necessarily like the most physically fit men or like the tallest or anything like that. You know, whatever, like there's a lot of unconventionally attractive men that are adored at this point, like Pete Davidson,
Yeah,
a womanizer. But like when I think of conventionally attractive, I do not think of Pete Davidson, and yet this man has an impressive repertoire of women that he's dated, some of the most beautiful
totally.
women in Hollywood. Or like Adam Driver is, I definitely don't think is conventionally attractive, but a lot of women
Mm,
find him attractive. Or Benedict Cumberbatch, I don't even think Benedict, is he even that tall? Like all of these men, like
quite tall.
again, he's really tall.
I think he's quite tall. He's
Mm.
quite tall.
But he's
So
definitely not conventionally attractive. And like all of them, again, like I think Pete Davidson's a perfect example of this. Like this guy who's like clearly a womanizer, ladies' man, and he
mm,
is just some like eye bags and super tall, skinny, lanky dude.
he's tall. He's taking the
Yeah,
hype pill. That's all you need.
there you
So
go.
what age are you again? Because we're basically different generations, aren't we? Because you're a Zoomer and I mean God knows how old I
Yeah,
am. I can't
I'm
remember.
24. I'm right on the cusp. But I
Does
think
that make you Zoomer or millennial?
I'm a Zoomer. The only thing that to be a Zoomer, you need to not remember like 9/11 is typically the most important heuristic, and I definitely
Oh,
don't
okay.
remember 9/11. I was like 3, so.
Okay, cool. And by the way, you didn't introduce yourself to at the beginning. Did you just want to
Mhm.
say a couple of things about what you're doing at the moment, or just
Oh,
to get that out of the way?
yeah. My name is Straighterade, or Aaron is my first name, and I'm looking to start live streaming soon and having more conversations like this. I'm at Straighterade on basically everything, or at Straighterade _ is my Twitch and all of that. Um, But yeah, I mostly just do like, I'm always up for a debate, political disagreements. I usually have people message me on Discord if they want to speak to me and debate with me.
Good stuff. And we met first in Miami on the Fresh and Fit show
Mhm.
back in January, which was quite fun. And Sneeko was there and Myron, and it was a spirited debate, wasn't it? About what were we talking about? Loads of things, really. We were talking actually mainly about whether women's roles in society are biologically or societally.
Yeah, because he
Right.
started off the things, we went around and like everybody needs to answer the loaded question: are men and women equal? Which could speak to so many things. And he, immediately clarifies, I'm not talking about like dignity wise. I'm talking just broadly. But I remember answering like, I mean, I think what he's trying to get at is like, I guess biologically or whatever, but I was like looking at it socially, like there are significant inequalities between men and women. We're probably just going to disagree about whether or not they're justified, or
Yeah.
like what are their origins or whatever, obviously. But like they're freely willing to admit, there's women overrepresented in certain sectors and men overrepresented in other sectors, and just the degree to which they believe it's biologically determined. But I thought a lot of their arguments fell flat, but it was really fun debating them.
Yeah, it was quite funny. So this is an interesting comment. So J20 says Pete still has status. Well, he does, but Ariana Grande, I would argue, has more status than Pete Davidson.
Mhm.
And also as well, I mean, some of these, when you look at some of these like Lothario type figures in these guys who seem to suddenly get, all these different women, like there's many other people that have status as well, but he seems to be doing particularly well. So what is it about him that's making him stand out? There must be something about him. It was the same actually with Russell Brand back in the day. I mean, Russell Brand has gone kind of nuts now. He's talking about all kinds of weird stuff. But back in years ago, he's a famous comedian in the UK, and he was always a ladies' man. And people would say, yeah, but he's famous. And it's like, well, okay, yes, he is famous, but there's plenty of other celebrities there's plenty of other
Well,
famous.
I really liked Russell Brand because he's one of the few like working class comedians that there are. So even if he wanted to try to appeal to like his resources or his finances, I'm like, this is somebody of like a modest
No,
background who's still very charismatic and like attracting a
yeah.
lot of different women. Like I know he was married to like Katy Perry for a time. I don't know if he's like since remarried. But either way, kind of seen as like a cultural like sex symbol, you know.
Yeah. Have you seen any of his recent stuff? He's on Rumble, I think, and I think he got kind of booted off. We're still on YouTube.
He was probably, I think he was deplatformed. I have no idea what it had to do with. I'm going to assume it's usually the main culprit tends to be vaccine skepticism or denialism of the efficacy.
I read it's really interesting with Russell Brand because he did come from a very, I don't want to say socialist. I mean, he wrote a book actually about upending the entire political system at one point, and it was almost a socialist kind of a tract, really. You know, he was always a bit of a lefty.
Labor-focused politics, working class politics.
Yeah, he was always on that side of things. And there was a really interesting article just recently I read in The Guardian. I can forward you the link later, but where it's basically saying now he's doing all of this dog whistle type right-wing stuff. Now he sort of tries to sit above it and say, well, I'm not right or left. I'm just all about love, man. And, you know, why can't we all come together? But all of the material that he's doing, all of the topics that he's doing, it's all like anti-vax or, you know, kind of climate change denial or election. That
actually kind of tracks because if like we're saying he embraced like working class politics, you know, that's like populist politics or like this anti-establishment bent.
Yeah.
So there's going to be kind of like you already have the reactionary tendencies just because he at one point in his life kind of reached more like left-leaning conclusions. It's that thought process that's like guiding him to these things. So if you always want to just be a contrarian against the grain, against the mainstream, if you feel like the majority of people are getting vaccinated, you have to be the brave one to not be vaccinated, right? Or like speak the truth and stuff like that. So I can see kind of it, you know, his like once sort of like hippie politics now just being reactionary politics and aligning with a lot of like fringe elements of the right.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, you mentioned about Marjorie Taylor Greene before, but there has seemed to be a crossover between some of the more hippie-ish side of what was more associated with the left, that now seems to be sort of become
recurring. Right. This is like alternative medicine, naturopathy, and stuff like that.
Yeah. With QAnon, there was a lot of people. Like, I remember listening to a lot of stuff about QAnon a couple of years ago, and they were saying that there was a lot of people into the sort of natural health thing who were also QAnon devotees, and it was sort of like, yeah, man, you know, we want to get away from big pharma,
it's a conspiracy mindset, right? Like it kind of tracks it. If you're somebody who's very skeptical of, you know, this idea that there could be medical consensus or institutions, or even questioning the idea of like, is there even objective truth, right? Like that would make you open to all sorts of things. And, you know, maybe at one point it was, you know, left or progressive opinions or whatever. So you might be embracing like equal rights for, like, you know, homosexual Americans, gay Americans and stuff like that. But you're also going to find yourself in the camp that's like, you know, if you're skeptical of like big pharma, what else would you be skeptical of? You know, vaccines, and you're going to be skeptical of vaccines. You're going to be skeptical of like the election results, and you can see the transformation kind of take. You know, they're going to move from like the kind of like it's called the Green Party to like, you know, maybe the Libertarian Party or stuff like this, QAnon. Like it's just this inherent distrust of everything. So you're always just going to kind of be like blindly just anti-establishment. It doesn't matter who or what. It's like even you know, Tim Pool. Like Tim Pool got his start with like Occupy Wall Street, which I think if you ask most people, like, what do you think the partisan affiliation was of like your average Occupy Wall Street protester? They would probably assume left. And, you know, Tim Pool was part of that, but Tim Pool has since moved, you know, centrist. And, you know, to me, he runs like he's a partisan hack. He's like a right winger. Because his entire content is just dedicated to like consistently like criticizing the Democrats, but never criticizing the right or the Republicans in the same way, even though like the things that it's like a lot of, I'm sure, valid critiques of like the Democratic establishment, but you could make them all the same for the Republican establishment. He never wants to do that. So like Occupy was just largely just anti-establishment to me, and kind of like blindly that you're going to find like a lot of idiosyncrasies and like ideological diversity in these types of like, if it's anti-X thing, like anti-vax, anti-establishment, it's just kind of blind contrarianism.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's this contrarianism for contrarianism's sake, isn't it? A lot of the time, where it's just everything is, you know, but it's kind of like, yeah, man, don't trust the mainstream media. And then instead trust this weird YouTube channel who's telling you that, you know, X, Y, and Z happened when, you know, it's like people say being skeptical, but why not be skeptical of some of the batshit stuff that you hear from some of
Right.
these
It's
sources,
like they take what, on its face is like this is a healthy degree of skepticism to have towards something, or to like, I can understand not wanting to just blindly accept or believe everything that your government says or authority says, but then they just don't even question the people who say that, like, oh, I have the answer, like these, like the Weinstein brothers or whatever. It's like I can't trust Fauci or whatever, but I will blindly trust like a Weinstein brother to know what he's talking about when it comes to vaccine efficacy.
Yeah.
Or Alex Jones, like
Well,
I'm just thinking, like, what evidence would it take for you to even like move off of this?
So so you're a Zoomer, basically, and we were talking about monogamy before. So what do Zoomers want in terms of monogamy? I mean, that's a fucking ridiculously broad question, but I mean, is there any? I mean,
well, as far as I know, like,
put it this way. So marriage and the traditional model, is that, do you think that that's going to persist, or do you think that there's resistance against that, or
there's resistance, but it's a question of, is that a product of economic circumstances, or is that a product of a genuine change in the social dynamics and trends? So, I know Zoomers are getting married, and if they do get married, they're getting married later than ever. Like there's less kids, but I know that there's this kind of other strain of kind of like trad or conservative Zoomers or whatever who still do desire those things. I think their frustration is that their current lifestyle and, like, working life, professional life, is not really compatible with any of these goals. I think we talked about this a little bit on Fresh and Fit. Is it that women don't want to have children, or is it that women are just they want children, but they don't want that at the expense of a career? So, whereas 30, 40 years, 50 years earlier, you would have seen women more likely to default to, well, I would regret not being a lawyer, but not as much as I'd regret not having a family. So I'm going to have a family.
Yeah.
Now I think the modern woman is more likely to kind of take the chance on focusing on their career and just having this more laissez-faire attitude of, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But my professional aspirations are going to be what's very fulfilling to me,
Yeah, exactly. And so what about polyamory, or because that's something that gets talked about a lot. Do you think that that's something that's gonna, because that in some ways, and it's not something I'm really, it's not been part of my personal life. It's not something I really aspire to myself. But I mean, it does seem that that's being talked about a lot more. Is this a possible solution? Is this where people are going now?
Well, I think that it is more popular and slightly more mainstream than it's ever been. But the criticisms that I've seen is it that you're interested in polyamory, or is it that you're afraid of commitment, and you're kind of using these things as like vehicles to find socially acceptable mechanisms to kind of like live out these kind of character flaws that you would probably need to like work on, like you shouldn't be trying to use polyamory as an excuse to, not engage with even like the partners that you have, because like when people say polyamory or whatever, that could mean so many different things to so many people. But I think a lot of people, the way that they go about open relationships is probably a bit haphazard. Like it's not this like fulfilling thing for every partner that's going to be involved. Again, like it's just a way for, I'm not cheating, or I'm not like a swinger or whatever. I'm in this arrangement or whatever. But when you ask them, like, so you have meaningful relationships with multiple people, and it's like, well, no, I have my primary partner, but we also like, we're free to have, as long as we disclose it, we're free to wander sexually, I see less emphasis on like the emotional fulfillment of it, or having meaningful relationships with like multiple partners, and it's more just like almost strictly like a sexual thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that seems to be the case. I mean, Destiny's in an open thing, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. I think he and Melina are.
Do you? I mean, obviously, you don't have to talk about that. I mean, I don't know if you know any details of that. Not okay. Fine. But it seems to be more of a. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think the emphasis is on the sexual side of things. You're allowed to sort of sexually play outside the relationship, as long as you remain the sort of the emotional core together. But
and I only say that because when people who are in open relationships, and if they're even married, it's like they would never go so far as to say like, oh, my husband has a girlfriend, or my wife has a boyfriend outside of her husband and stuff like that. It really is just, well, we're free to engage sexually with who we please, but we live together, we're married, we may even have like kids together. So it really is just like finding exceptions. And like, again, like this is what I was saying earlier, is that people think that there is like there's like so much that could like fall under the umbrella of like non-monogamy. Like no two non-monogamous relationships are going to look the same, but two monogamous relationships, I think there's going to be a lot of overlap in like the goals and desires for like that one, you know, one-on-one couple.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, so we talked earlier about, you know, the big thing in Red Pill is really hypergamy and female behavior and everything, and perhaps, you know, unfairly the focus is on women, and women are like this, and women are like that, and they're all 304s and all of that. I mean, what would your response be to that? Because there is this idea that, oh, if I get married, you know, she's always going to be looking for the next best thing, and at some point she's going to leave me for Chad or the pool boy or whatever. I mean, now, as I said, my position on this is somewhat different. I think that monogamy is hard for both sides. But obviously women, you know, do walk out on marriages. I mean, do you think that, have you got any response to that? Have you got any feelings on that either way?
I think that one, it kind of presupposes that there are men who don't want to be married. You know, I always hear so much emphasis on like it's women who are trapping men into these marriages. And I just wonder, like, I'm like, where does this narrative come from? Because the majority of women do not, like, again, like they use the mechanism of like baby trapping, but that's convoluted. I'll get into that. But like the first part is that women don't propose to men. So men of their own free will are proposing to women. So it's kind of like saying like, oh, she's trapping you into a marriage. I'm like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, what is she gonna like? Unless she's holding you at gunpoint to get on your knee and give her a ring, that's something that you chose to do. So I'm like, first admit that most men want, as far as I can tell, want to get married, you know? And then the second thing is like the baby trapping thing. Okay, women, this has just never made sense to me. It's so convoluted. It's like, I think most women would like to avoid being a single mom. Or, you know, and I mean single, I'm like trying like to capture the spirit of what it means to be a single mom. I don't mean like what would technically or nominally fall under like single mother is probably unmarried mothers, but I'm not just talking about that. Like nobody wants to be raise a child on their own, where a partner has abandoned them or whatever. So this idea that an unmarried woman would risk getting pregnant with a partner that she is going to then attempt to leverage that pregnancy with to stay, I don't hear this happening. I've not heard this happening. Like there's little to no, like red pillars will also bring up statistics about alimony and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is like, where are the men who are going to jail for not paying alimony or for not paying like their divorce settlements and stuff like that? I mean, technically, I guess those legal avenues are there, but do you actually see, you know, the state enforcing or like, you know, taking money out of men's accounts to move it to like a woman's or whatever? Like we would hear about this, or be like an epidemic if that were happening.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, and obviously that would in the US, obviously that would be state by state. I mean, I'm sure they have. Well, I'm not sure. I would imagine there probably have been cases of that, but you may be right that actually
they're speaking. If there's cases of it, fringe. Like,
but is it like the cases in the sense of like when they bang on about drag queen story hour, and it's like, well, when's that actually happened? Like, how many times that actually happened? You know?
Right, exactly. It's like I don't doubt that there's been some sexual impropriety at some drag show somewhere or whatever, but I'm like, is this an epidemic? Is this really what contributes to like sexual abuse of children? Like when I think of like circumstances that contribute to that, I don't think of drag shows. It always just has come off to me as like LGBT panic, you know? Like there were conspiracy theories like in the 90s that like daycares were these like hotbeds for like child abuse and stuff like that. But it's just a moral panic. It's just completely unsubstantiated. If there's evidence, I'd like to see it, but I've not seen it yet. And so like similar, I've not seen this idea that like, again, it's only women who want to trap men into this arrangement. No, I think they're like, you know, men, and like you're saying, it's both. There's dissatisfaction on both ends with monogamy, and I think there's a desire for both a lot of men and a lot of women to get married.
No, I think that's right. I think a lot of men do want to get married. I mean, I personally have never really seen the appeal in it. I mean, it's not to say. I mean, I'd never rule anything out, but I certainly have been champing at the bit. Like, oh my god, I just got to get married. Partly because of my own, and this is where one's own biases come into play. Because I mean, my parents were divorced when I was younger. My dad then remarried. Quite a sort of turbulent relationship with my stepmother. So I never had this like advert of the white picket fence of it being this amazing thing. You know, it's like, oh my god, I just can't wait to, you know, meet that one special someone, and all of that. I mean, it's just never like that for me. And to be honest, what I've seen around me since, as I've gotten older, and you see friends getting married and then getting divorced, or not necessarily being very happy and everything, I don't see it as being a bed of roses out there. And as I say, it's that as much as anything that leads me to the conclusion that, well, let's perhaps not the conclusion, but certainly asking the question rather strongly: does this thing actually work? Really, it doesn't seem like a lot of people who are married over the long term are very happy. Now, of course, you get some who appear to be, but I mean, I certainly, what I see around me doesn't paint a very rosy picture.
Positive picture, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I know. Like when people think, like, I don't want to say it's paradoxical. Of course, there are happy marriages and stuff like that, but I think the standard, like, stereotypical depiction of somebody in a marriage is not necessarily somebody who's like very free and happy.
Yeah.
I think the most important tie to sever socially is this idea that if you lack the desire to get married, that doesn't mean that you lack the desire to have a partner or emotional intimacy. There's so much wrapped up in marriage that it's like, the gateway of entry or to be married is to go to a courthouse and sign a marriage license. Like, they're not actually going to test, like, do you love this person? Are you committed to them? They're not going to be following up, like, if the state is not going to be checking if you've actually been faithful to them. It is so, like, anybody can get married. It's the same way that, like, any man can become a father, or like any man can, like, biologically father a child, but is every man like a dad, right? Like, we're not really capturing the spirit of what it means. So, the red pill is trying to say that, like, or like, would you say that, like, of the traditional red pill is trying to say that, like, we need to get back to marriage? I'm thinking, like, what is it, like, what are the qualities of a marriage that are just so specific to signing that contract and being one-on-one with a person that you couldn't get from a variety of different relationships and a lot of different unorthodox arrangements?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but a number of these people are also Christians as well, so they would see it as being part of that. I mean, I don't really.
There's like, if that, like, I do think a lot of it is informed by, like, Judeo-Christian values. So if that's your basis for it, there's no, it's dogma at that point. There's nothing. I couldn't show you anything. Like, even if I could, like, empirically and demonstrably prove monogamy is just not the way for, not the productive way to be, they would keep insisting that, like, no, it is, but people are just not doing it right, And there's all these other social factors. There's degeneracy, and there's cultural influence, and there's all of this that's, like, impeding people's ability to have this arrangement, instead of just accepting, like, maybe this isn't very practical for most people. It seems like a lot of people have a lot of difficulty adhering to this one man, one woman, relationship and marriage.
I mean, so what is the solution, Erin? Straight away, what is the solution? I mean, well, I don't know. Do you have any sense of what a way forward might be for this? I mean,
like, the prescriptive advice I guess I would give is already things that I see taking hold, whether people are choosing to do that consciously or not, which is, again, people are waiting to get married longer than ever. And then, and getting less, and, like, less are getting married just overall to begin with. And Zoomers are more likely to be secular and moving away from traditional views on these things. Like, I personally think that's a good thing. It just, this idea that, like, the nuclear family, which is, like, a modern conception and a very confining and restraining one, is, like, the way, is the ideal to live up to. I'm very skeptical of,
Yeah.
Especially, like, I had this conversation. I know you spoke to Pixie, right, on stream already?
Yeah.
We had this debate with John Zerka where he always holds up, like, the 1950s as, like, the model of society.
Yeah, well,
like,
that's what, a lot of these,
But why? Because I'm like, you're talking about a time where there were, gay men getting in relationships with women that they weren't attracted to because they were too scared to come out. You're talking about women who had issues with anxiety and substance abuse and dependence. And people dying of polio, and that's not even to speak about, like, the racial issues and like, effectively racial apartheid in the United States. So, like, it's completely a mystified understanding of, like, the nuclear family in the 1950s. It was like, that is, like, an over romanticized, like, fiction, and what they yearn for is, like, a nostalgia, like, for a past that, like, that never existed. There was not this stability in relationships because they refused to even look at, like the laws. It was very difficult for women for people to even get divorced. Like, even if you wanted to cite infidelity, you were literally going to have to go to a court of, like, a family court of law and prove that you had witnesses to corroborate a man's infidelity. So, that's why I was saying, like, it's a red herring, and it doesn't really tell us much to only look at, like, divorce rates to measure the success of, like, relationships and intimacy for a generation, because there were people who were staying in marriages in the 50s and the 60s who wanted to leave those marriages, but it was very difficult to legally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think even if you were to use the greatest coercion to keep people together in marriages, which I suppose they're used to in the past, or to a greater extent the further back you go, it doesn't mean everyone was happy. They were probably miserable as hell, but they were just, it was very difficult to leave for the reasons that you said. So again, but I come back to the same conclusion, which I think it's always been difficult for people, because I'm not sure that we are really attuned to it. I just don't think it really works very well over the long term. That's always just been my impression. I mean, again, we would need to. Is
your metric more just looking at rates of infidelity?
Yeah, looking at rates of infidelity, looking at the divorce rates. Plus,
I think people would sooner, try to, like, they hold these monogamous beliefs. Even people who cheat, would you ask them, like, do you consider, like, feel the urge to be non-monogamous? And they're like, no, of course not. They don't even really like that they're cheating, but that's why I was saying, like, they almost treat it like this biological urge that, like, oh, I just wish I wasn't this way. I wish I could only be attracted. And I think the issue is that they attempt to recreate this dynamic and multiple, be a serial monogamist, right? Because they understand that, like, well, even though I'm cheating, I personally could never accept a partner that is going to deliberately step out on me. That's not a terms of agreement that I'm willing to do. It's usually like, they want a one-sided arrangement.
Yeah.
They want, and then you're actually talking about another religious institution, which would be like polygamy, like having sister wives or, like, multiple wives. And I don't think anybody's looking to embrace that. They're looking to, I think what's going to end up, it's what people are forced to reckon with is that, like, again, monogamy in the 21st century is going to just have to look a lot different. Like, pornographic materials and just, like, the widespread availability of something like that. Like, even just maybe 40 years ago, for somebody's spouse to be looking at pornographic materials was probably considered to be cheating. But now there's plenty of couples in happy monogamous relationships who there's no ambiguity about, like, we don't step out on each other sexually or really emotionally, but both are engaging consensually with pornographic materials, and that's not considered to be cheating any longer. So I think Zoomers will either look to expand what it even means to be monogamous. Like, you can consume porn and still be monogamous. You can, like, have these emotional affairs online, and that's still monogamy, or stay active on a dating app, but you don't act on it, so that's still monogamy. Before they would, and then others will just say, like, I'm not even going to try to expand monogamy to be that broad. I would just accept that, like, I'm poly and I want to have, multiple people in my life.
Yeah. Did you want to share where you sit on this? I mean, would you get married? It's probably a little bit early to be thinking about this stuff, but I mean, is that something that you've always wanted, or do you have
no? I got dunked on Fresh and Fit when I was saying that, like, I've never been on a date and I've never had, like, a partner. So, but I mean, I had my nose in a book, like, since I graduated, because I graduated with my associate's degree. So I was doing like a college program in high school. And then when I got out of it, I was trying to complete that and, like, maintain my GPA. And then quarantine started, and we're supposed to be socially isolated. I didn't want to get the virus or spread it. So, people are shocked, and I'm like, I've never been on a date or whatever. Of the two I've been asked on, I was stood up. So, but I didn't do a lot of it in high school, because I just remember thinking, like, seeing friends of mine who were marrying their high school sweetheart, and I was like, I don't want this. Like, they're like, the likelihood that just someone from my high school happens to be the person that I'm going to be the most compatible with. I guess what people appeal to is, like, oh, the cultural values that you share with that person who comes from a familiar background. But I live in, like, a very conservative, well, it's like a democratic stronghold, but in terms of social values, it's very socially conservative. It's like a Catholic area. So I'm like, I don't really even share like the social values. So there's that familiarity with the background, but it's like I don't find myself like it's very like I didn't want to marry like my high school sweetheart. I was like, where does this go? This seems like a horrible idea because people think, especially people who marry their high school sweethearts, like they don't even know what's out there in terms of compatibility. And I'm like, what is the rush? Like, why do you need to, what is this insistence on like getting married so quickly? Like the courthouses are not going anywhere. Those marriage licenses, like they're never going to run out, like you can go do that at any time. There's no need to like do it so quickly. So that was like, I didn't want to fall into like the trap of like, being from my bumfuck town and being somebody who like married my high school sweetheart and like, I have like one life experience or whatever. Like, I feel like some people, all it takes for them is to like their bubble to be burst is like go to a city or two and realize like there's a lot of different ways to live life. I've kind of just been like, I've been the one in the bubble, thinking that like this is the only way to exist.
It's interesting actually because somebody put a comment about this. Rabbit Gone Rogue says, if you think monogamy is dead, just go to any small town in the US or UK. If you can't provide, you are not an option to small town women. Well, that's true in the sense, I mean, I would agree with that. I think if you go to a small town here, and from what you're saying, obviously in the States as well, you're going to see a lot of examples of monogamy. So I don't think it's dead in that sense. I think a lot of people are still doing it.
Right. It's not dead, but it's just that people have difficulty sticking with it. And even in married relationships, I think even the majority of people who are cheated on while they're married, they stay with their partner. So, but like, I think it's important to not just, again, like look at only a divorce rate or something like that, because it's like, it's possible for people to remain married, but kind of stray away what they had initially agreed upon in terms of like how they are going to relate to each other throughout that marriage. Like you might start just like, again, like my partner, myself, emotionally, sexually, but 10 years into a marriage, if you're, staring down like, well, we don't want to get divorced, especially with like newer attitudes, like I can definitely see, I'm sure it's becoming more prevalent that like couples therapists are actually saying like, have you ever considered expanding the bounds of your marriage and having like an open marriage, and now you're looking at like, a marriage that's on paper supposed to be monogamous, but if you actually look at the terms and conditions of like their, relationship, now it has multiple people in it. So
well, that's an interesting point as well, because I think what you get is a sort of a functional, even if on paper we're saying we're monogamous, but actually a lot of people are stepping out anyway, even if it's secretly. So they're not really monogamous. They're actually, it's actually something else. They're just calling it monogamy. So, so I think covertly people are expanding the boundaries of it anyway. And probably always did.
Like, I think everyone likes to think themselves monogamous, but I'm like, really, you're really only attracted to your husband or your wife. Like, there's never been anybody else who you're attracted to. Like, I think that alone should. But and like then when I've told that to people, the next thing that they pivot to is like, but I don't act on it. And I'm like, is that really like a comfort to people though? That like, I don't know how, maybe it is to some people, but like that if they learn, like, I feel like another stereotype would be like, women being distrustful of their partner's social media engagement. Like, I don't even like him looking at Instagram models. I don't even like him engaging with those pictures. And that's a man who is like, assuming that he's not cheating on her. Is like, that's still considered to be like, even just, gazing or the knowledge that he is attracted to somebody else. That like that, like you're already talking about, like people, like, again, like we can, the same way you can have multiple friends and multiple best friends, it's like you can be attracted to multiple people. I guess like if monogamy is only being defined by like, well, I don't act on it. It's like, but then you have kind of the same predisposition. The only difference between you and a non-monogamous person is that you don't indulge it. Yeah, but you have the urges,
And that, and actually, that is something that is I have always found quite uncomfortable to discuss within the confines of a relationship, because if you're in a relationship with somebody, like a monogamous relationship with somebody, to then sit down with them and say, oh, I saw this girl today and she was super hot. I mean, that kind of thing is, I think many women would be uncomfortable with that. And equally, if she came to me and said, oh, I saw this guy today, he was super, like this Chad, he was amazing. I would probably not be happy with that, because it upsets this sort of fantasy that we've built up in our minds that we're only attracted to one another. Now, I'm sure there are relationships where people are super, super honest with each other in that way. But it's not.
But they're usually acting on it.
Yeah,
Like the type
yeah.
of couple that's going to be so open as to tell their partner that they find themselves attracted to a coworker, they find themselves attracted to a celebrity, is going to be you know, like somebody who's going to be more willing to step out, or like the boundaries of their monogamous relationship may include, sexual liaisons and like rendezvous with other people,
Mm-hmm. I mean, could monogamy? I mean, it wouldn't really be monogamy, would it? But could it? The
No,
boundaries ever
because
be
part of it
established?
is, again, like you're saying, it's the delusion. It's like both of us are going to pretend like we're only attracted to it. When we find ourselves attracted to other people, we're going to keep it to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this is, and that actually is one of the key things when people often talk about intimacy, that in relationships, and you can really open yourself up to somebody. I personally have never been in a relationship with a woman where I felt able to really be honest about that side of myself. So in a way, although I've been honest about other, many other things, but in a way, I'm always hiding part of myself in a relationship. So there might be people who watch this and they say, well, Troy, you should just be super, super honest next time you're with a girlfriend and whatever. But in practice, it's very hard to do that, I think.
Yeah, like
You know what I
do
mean?
people even want that?
I don't think they
Like I
do.
think even people in monogamous relationships, they like, and those that can accept it are not delusional about like, oh, they're not attracted to anybody else. I think most people freely admit like my husband or wife probably is attracted, but like they don't bring it to my attention. And I'm
Exactly.
thinking
Yeah.
like, is
Yeah.
that a comfort to you? Or like it would be a comfort to me that like there's this entire part of their sexuality that I guess for my benefit or to not offend me, they're not going to mention at all, because I'm like, seems to be a huge, like someone's sexuality is going to be a huge part of their life, huge part of your marriage, and you're operating within just very narrow confines. And to what end? Especially if like, so like I can imagine a couple people, again, like people would sooner have a spouse who regrettably cheats on them before they have a spouse who never cheats, but they're open about their attraction to other women, and that alone keeps them loyal to their partner because they don't want to hear it.
Exactly. But I mean, would you? I mean, I think it's natural they don't want to hear it, right? Though, I mean, I'm not sure I'd. So, did you
Wait,
ever see?
well, if you said that you felt confined, that you couldn't share with, past girlfriends of yours or female
Yeah.
friends, just open it, like your attraction to other women, is the opposite. Are you comfortable hearing her say those things, or no?
No, I wouldn't really be comfortable with it. It's like I prefer what.
What, just that like it always just goes one way, right? It's like I want to be
No,
open
no,
about
no, no,
mine,
no,
but
but
ideally,
no,
like they wouldn't be open about theirs.
no, it goes both ways because I would be uncomfortable. Like I said, I mean, I would be uncomfortable sharing. Like, oh, I saw 5 girls today, and they're all super hot. But anyway, babe, let's have dinner now. I'd be uncomfortable with that.
Right.
But equally, I'd be uncomfortable with her saying it to me. So I'm saying that we kind of surround ourselves with these pretty lies. I've actually, in a way, I've sort of benefited from that, or I've quite liked those pretty lies when I've been in the relationship. But equally, it does seem to me neither of us are really being honest with one another in a way. We're not being honest from the core of our being about a
Right,
very
you're just
large.
agreeing to both keep it to yourself for the
Yeah,
sake of
yeah,
them.
yeah,
And
exactly,
I think that's
exactly.
honestly like the reason why people don't share it is, even if they're comfortable like they don't want to do it one time, because it's going to, once your partner freely admits, I find myself attracted to my coworker, like that is going to instill a sense of doubt that is never going to be forgotten in that relationship, and for pragmatic reasons, it's like, even though I don't think my partner is like real, like, again, they accept that I'm attracted to other people, but to just be open about that would, if I did ever cheat, they're going to say like, I knew it because you were freely admitting to being attracted, as if like that would have been
Well,
some predictor for it,
well, it's weird because the pretense is sort of part of like if you're with a woman and equally if a woman's with a guy, but I'm just saying if you're with a woman, and if I'm with a woman and she's just saying the whole time how actually she's fantasizing about she'd love to have sex with all these other guys, that's just for better or worse, my tiny male ego or whatever, or my enormous male ego or whatever. But that's going to feel quite hurtful, and I think that's why most women don't do that. And it's equally why most men wouldn't share the same thing to most women.
Well, do you think? I think
in...
there's even in that like open expression of attraction, that means very different things along gendered lines. So a man openly expressing physical attraction to a woman, I think women assume they would have sex with her if they had the opportunity. But a woman expressing a physical attraction to a man, that doesn't necessarily mean that she would actually cheat, because I think women kind of, at least right now, there's not just it's not enough to just have like a physical attraction to somebody. There also tends to be like, okay, I'm not going to act on it unless there's an emotional attraction here, you know?
Yeah.
Or do you think that's, maybe this is like, you can give me more insight into like red pill ideology? Would they say that like women, oh no, like women really don't care about like that emotional side of attraction, and it's purely just like they're going for, giga chads and people strictly off looks?
No, I think they would say that, and in fact, I can't remember if Myron said something like this when we were on Fresh and Fit, but I think they would say that it's actually worse when women cheat in a way, because there is more of an emotional component to it. So whereas a guy, because guys are programmed to just spread their seed or whatever, like with guys it can be, and I believe this to be true actually. I think guys can have sex. I think a guy can absolutely, from the bottom of his heart, love his main girl, 100%, but he can still step out on her and have meaningless sex with somebody else. It is meaningless. It's kind of a physical thing only, and he still absolutely loves that woman. There is a perception in the red pill that the other way around, it doesn't really work quite in the same way. That if a woman does step out physically, it's likely either because she's very dissatisfied with the relationship she's in, or
right, that there's a parallel relationship there. Like there's a whole affair, right? Not just like a sexual encounter.
She's got feelings for the new guy, basically.
Right.
So it's kind of worse because the guy doesn't necessarily have those feelings for the barista that he's fucked, whereas this woman does for the guy that she's fucked. Would you agree with that? Do you think there might be some truth in that?
I think that is probably, well, I mean, the first thing that I would disillusion them of is that women have sex with men that they don't love all the time. I promise you.
No.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the real black pill truth. But in terms of like what it takes for a married woman to step out on her husband, I do think that there is more likely to be an emotional affair. It just depends on whether or not it's ongoing, And I think there are men who, it's maybe not for lack of want for emotional connections with multiple women, but they don't want to lead their, side partner on, their mistress on. And so they do restrict themselves to strictly having physical engagements with the person, not because they don't actually have an interest in having, friendship or camaraderie or like basically a friends with benefits outside of your marriage, but because they're like, I'm trying to like, I don't want to have two like emotionally, like, two pissed off women in my life, and if I start an affair, that's already more complicated, as opposed to women starting, I guess, emotional and like, complete affairs with men outside of it. I guess there's not this like cultural perception or stereotype yet of like a needy, what is the male equivalent of like a mistress? A mister, the other man? Like what, I don't know what you would call it. Like there's no
side guy or something.
Yeah, like a side guy or whatever. There's not this like perception that, men who are the other man in a relationship, like that they're not going to go crazy or whatever. They're in the same way that a woman who you step out on, she's going to go psycho. She's going to tell your wife. She's going to do this. She's going to do that. She's going to try to sabotage your marriage. I don't know if it's not that men don't have the proclivity to. I think like for strategic reasons, both genders are engaging or are their affairs look different ways because of like social dynamics, less any lack of desire on any part.
Well, I think guys will certainly, get hurt and cut up if they feel they're in a relation, she's stepping out on the boyfriend or the partner and he wants more and she's not giving it to him. I think guys certainly get butt hurt. I mean, how mental they'll go obviously varies from case to case, but then equally with the women as well. I mean, how mental each individual woman's going to go is going to vary case by case. So, I mean, I think I think one of the things that the red pill doesn't take into account as much is that actually a lot of these things, apply to both sides, really, perhaps in varying degrees. I mean, so Don DeMarco here, who has more opportunity though? Basically, he's saying recent studies have shown it's slanted one way. So basically, he's saying women have more opportunity to cheat than the average guy. And this comes back to more like not the black pill thing. Actually, this is not a black pill thing. This is the idea that actually women are just have more sexual availability than most men. So for a woman to go out and
it's weird because they'll say that, but then at the like they'll simultaneously say that like women are the ones that have all the options, but then they'll also say that like men who are cheating on their wives are just having like all these sexual affairs, like oh, he's fucked like tens of women, in the span of their marriage, and I'm like, how does this square? Like how can you have those two competing ideas, or do you not think that they're competing?
I suppose it would come down to the individuals, really. I mean, I do think there is truth in the fact that a very average dude who's not particularly great looking, who's maybe not in very good shape, who's probably, not sort of rich or whatever, he hasn't really got a lot going for him. I think he's going to find it harder to find somebody to step out with than the average woman. I think that's the point that they're making. Who the average woman can get is another question.
Do they think, I guess it rests upon the assumption that, like we were saying earlier, that you think that when women have affairs, they're more likely to have full-on emotional and sexual affairs.
No, I think,
and then they think that, like, oh no, there's these women, like, like a woman can have sex with somebody like the same day very easily, so they're like they have that. But I'm like, are they exercising it though? Are they actually doing that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, so Don DeMarco says it squares because he's a married Chad. so that's the thing. I mean, like, it depends who we're talking about individuals here, aren't we? So if a guy has banged 10 women during his marriage, maybe he's got some of those qualities. Maybe he's a bit of a Chad, perhaps. But I mean, we're talking in sort of made up scenarios here, aren't we? So
right, they're just hypotheticals. That's why it's like that's why there's so many like convenient explanations about the red pill. Like I said, when you first hear it, it just sounds like a compelling story and narrative. But then when you really think about it, you're like, well, is that really the stereotype or social dynamic that's like going on?
To go back to the thing about women just for a second, though, I want to just clarify that I didn't mean that the perception is that every woman who has sex with somebody else is madly in love with that guy, or indeed has a full-on affair with that guy necessarily, that she can still maybe just have sex with him once or a few times. But there's still the perception that it's worse, because the idea is, and maybe you can say if you think this is true or not, but the idea is that women need a bit more in order to have sex. They need to feel something a little bit more. Whereas a guy...
I think that's a product of women feeling unsafe about just casually engaging with men sexually, or like they have to know that, like, if I'm going to risk my marriage, that I'm not just doing it for sex, like I'm doing it because I can't resist this person, because I have an emotional connection to it that I want to fulfill sexually as well now. And I guess what the narrative that I don't like is that a man stepping out on his wife for sexual reasons only. It's like, well, there's almost this kind of like shrug about it, which is like, men are biologically driven to do this. But a woman who does it, like, oh, I only step out on my husband for sexual reasons, she's a slut. She's a whore for doing this. There's never like like she's biologically driven to do this, or like excuses made. There's always like this castigating of women like that for doing something like that.
Well, I mean, women do tend to have fewer... Actually, I can't say that, can I?
You can't make generalizations about women. Crazy.
I was going to make a generalization. I was going to say women tend to have fewer partners. Put it this way, right? When a man and a woman go on a date,
women do tend to have less partners, which is why the hypergamous thing, like where women are just like fucking all of these men, falls apart to me, because it's like, don't we usually think that women tend to need there's a higher barrier of entry for each woman to bring themselves to have sex with a man. Usually it's like it involves an emotional component. Unless
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a contradiction that I would be interested in talking to a black filler, because I'm like, how do you explain this? I feel like these are two contradictory like hypotheses. You couldn't have both of them at once.
You should get on a debate with Wheat Waffles, actually. Are you familiar with him?
No, who's Wheat Waffles?
He's a guy whose avatar is a wheat waffle.
Is a waffle? Oh, I think I saw him on Steven's stream. And
has he been on Destiny? So he's a British guy. Actually.
Yes. Okay, I did hear this guy. Yeah.
But I'm not sure exactly where his position is now, because he was sort of black pill, and he's done loads of videos talking about looks and if you're a sub 5, as they call it, then you're it's over and all that. But I think he's moving more towards. We've done some streams. I've done some streams with him, and my friend James Tusk, who I do a bit of content with. we've done some stuff with him, and he's a bit more open to the idea that you can improve yourself, and you can transcend, as they say. You can get better and you can be more successful if you work at it. But so I think he's shifted to a softer, less hardcore black pill position. But he'd be an interesting person for you to do something with, actually, because
yeah, I remember him kind of like machine gunning out just like typical like red pill talking points and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm sure Steven kind of like pushed back on each one of them, and he would kind of like I'm sure like what ends up happening in like so many debates like that is that they have their little talking points, and somebody will push back and they'll concede and concede and concede, but they'll still return to the original point and then just move on to the next talking point.
Yeah. No, I need to watch that one as well, actually. I think it's interesting, actually, because the black pill guys really actually cite studies a lot, and they will claim that their approach to all of this stuff is more scientifically rigorous.
Please.
It is more scientifically rigorous.
Because a lot of what they use is survey data, and I'm like, that is not the same. Like the extrapolations that they take from survey data. One, a survey data it's not that it's not valid data, but it's data that always needs to be properly contextualized, and those are not assessing constants. Those are assessing outcomes, and those dynamics can change and be fluid, and they're going to be highly culturally contingent and depend on country and age and race and gender and break down along all these different lines. But they just want to take this very broad, like, women feel this way with no account for like, I'm like, but do lesbian women feel this way? Are we talking about like straight cisgendered women, or are we talking about all women? Because again, there's lesbians in this world. There are like Asian women, Black women, Chinese women, like by ethnicity. There's going to be a lot of breakdowns with all of this depending on their cultural background. So to just have like this simple explanation of like women broadly like or dislike this thing, I'm like, even when they say data, like again, like unless the data that they're citing like is saying who participated in it, like the majority of the women in the study were Caucasian women between the ages of like 23 and 30 who were unmarried and who lived in the United States. Like that's a very specific faction of women. That's not going to apply to women in China or women in Taiwan or Jamaica.
No, I agree with you on that, and I mean they cite a mixture. They'll cite some academic studies, and they'll also cite a lot of data from things like Tinder and from Plenty of Fish.
I hate those. I hate the Tinder data because I'm like, this is a private company. There's like no way for you to independently verify that they're actually putting forward accurate metrics for their websites.
Yeah, and also I think I just think it's inherently problematic anyway. They will say, well, look, this is what's happening on Tinder. And I'll say, so for example, like the argument against dating apps is that many guys, I think, and probably many women, but many guys find dating apps not particularly, they don't get very good results, blah, blah, blah. Most guys that I've spoken to, when they approach women in real life and they have a real life interaction, they tend to get better results than they get from dating apps. Okay.
Of course.
That's actually been the case. That's actually been the case for me as well. So, but the black pill people will say, no, it's exactly the same, because what she wants on Tinder, why would she want anything different in the real world? No. Well, the reason is because what's she looking at? For a start, Tinder is a looks-based app, basically. I mean, what else have you got to go on? So
the bios. Everyone's reading those bios.
Yeah, but who reads the bio? I mean,
it's everyone, like swiping, like they're just going off the pictures. So,
and of course, when you meet somebody in real life, you communicate so much more because you showcase your personality and the way that you come across, your charisma and your vibe and all that stuff. So but so it seems to me problematic anyway, even if the data is valid from something like Tinder or Plenty of Fish, to use that and to then map that onto the real world and say, well, this is exactly the same in all scenarios. But the other thing, and you're right, is that the dating marketplace, in inverted commas, isn't this just homogenous thing that's exactly the same all over the planet. And I think that a lot of these guys, to be honest, I feel like they're probably living at home. They probably haven't been out of the United States, or they haven't been out of England or whatever. They haven't really traveled a lot. And when I've traveled around, I've traveled to a number of places now. And you see huge differences culturally in terms of dating in somewhere like Eastern Europe or Latin America versus England versus the States. I mean, massive differences, or Asia or whatever. So they're not taking any of these things into account.
Right. That's why it's like it's such a simple, like, oh yeah, this biological urge in women. Even if I granted to them that there are these biological predispositions, the way that it would manifest and look across cultures and societies and countries is definitely not going to be the same. Even if there was some, say, like one biological marker that you could trace it back to, it's definitely not going to manifest the same way, because, you know, there are social factors to consider that we're not considering here.
Exactly. So no, I think the black pill guys are very misguided, but you should definitely try and do something with
and I wouldn't even say like you know, my friend and I jokingly say like we're here to like blue pill all of these guys. I really just want to know, like, how did they have this conclusion? Is it based off of, like, are you watching YouTube videos and you're being like sold this narrative, or is this what they're finding in like their day-to-day interactions? Because I can understand if they had said like, in my life this has always been the experience, but half the time, like you're saying, they are at home, they don't have large friend groups, they don't have a lot of relationship history, and then they're you know, confidently asserting that like all women are like this, and I'm like, how would you know? Or again, like, you have to just be going off of like a story that somebody told you, but like, did you even go and like try to verify that in person? Has that been your personal experience? Or are they engaging with these statistics and they just become so intimidated to even try?
No, because
they're giving up before they even try.
No, they give up before they try, because they want to believe it, because it's easier to believe it and to not take action and to sit in their room, and you can sort of get off on wallowing in the misery of it all, you know?
Right, like, oh, it's not my fault. You know,
yeah, exactly.
It's biology. I can't do anything about it. That, like, how convenient. You know, you never have to do anything. It's always just like it's someone else's fault, or it's all of women. It's the like wicked predisposition of women. That's why I'm single. And I'm thinking, like, again, do you not think that like normal guys are getting married like every single day in this country? Like, per minute, if I looked at the amount of marriages that happen in the United States alone, there's probably like 30 marriages happening every minute or something like that. When it statistically like breaks down.
And also as well, I mean, you just walk out, all you have to do is walk out into the streets or onto the subway or whatever, and you just see very average looking people who
couples.
Are, you know, I mean, it's, you know, so it doesn't hold any, it doesn't
to scrutiny. No.
Yeah, at all. But it's an interesting phenomenon nonetheless.
And even with Tinder, I think there's this overemphasis on like, I wish that, like, this is something that I've always wanted to see. Maybe data out there exists. I would like love to speak to couples, monogamous couples that have been in successful long-term relationships for like 5 to 10 years, and ask them to create their own Tinder profiles and just present it to them and say, based off of these pictures and this bio, would you find yourself enticed to swipe on them? You know, and it's very possible that they could look at their, you know, boyfriend's profile or girlfriend's profile and be like, you know, I don't really like this picture of them, and I didn't find their bio very compelling, and I wouldn't have swiped on them, but here they are, and they're my soulmate, or they're the love of my life, or we get along famously. Well, like, those apps are so limiting.
It's happened to me many times. I mean, I was dating this. I remember one girl I met in London. I was just, you know, out and about, met her in the daytime. We got talking, got her phone number. We ended up dating, blah blah blah. And she said to me, you know, I wouldn't have if I'd have seen you on a dating app, I wouldn't have swiped on you, because you're not really my type. You know, you're not my type. But the way that you know, we interacted when you came up to me, it sort of you know, she thought, well, actually, okay, this guy's got something about him. And so she, you know, we ended up dating. So, I mean, just examples like that. And this is the point that I'm making. I think when you meet people in real life, it's very different to the very static perception that they get of you looking at just a couple of pictures that you may have picked quite badly anyway. Because, I mean, guys often don't pick particularly great pictures. So,
well, they don't just not pick good ones. They just also don't take good ones. Yeah. You know, in the first place, they don't have good ones to put up there. And I'm just thinking, like, how many times have you found yourself, you know, it was a match on Tinder and you even went so far as to go on a date with them? I've heard of so many people who were like, I was very attracted to them. We even had good rapport in the messages, but in person we had no chemistry.
That happens as well.
So frequently. So the idea that like Tinder is all about looks and stuff like that, I'm like, I don't think that people just go, you know, I think what people select for is like the person who is both the most attractive person that they swiped on and were a match with, but also who they have the most rapport with. So you'd be less likely to, you're going to look at all of your matches, find the most attractive person. But if they're just like, want to hook up, will they do that? Or it's like, well, I was kind of hoping for something more, like maybe like I would be open to hooking up with this person, but at least like a date. And they don't even want to, they're not even pretending to be interested in that. So I'm not going to go, and like already there, like, one of the like, tenets of like red pill truths or whatever it is already falling flat on its face, because I don't think that people are selecting mates based solely off physical attraction if they don't see that chemistry, if they don't feel that connection.
No, that's a black pill. That's a black pill.
Or black pill. There you go.
Yeah. Get the pill sorted. Get your pill sorted out.
I have to get my pills right. There's too many to keep straight. There's the I see that subreddit, the purple pill debate. There's the blue pill, the red pill, the black pill, the hype pill.
There's the white pill as well. I'm not quite sure what the white pill is, but
I'm sure I know what the white pill is. And the white pill is it like what, racial superiority? Is that what we're calling like racism?
Well, there might be some people who are using it for that. But no, I don't. There is something called the white pill, which is a more pragmatic version of the black pill or something. Maybe somebody in the chat will know, but yeah. So look, anyway, we've been on for a little while now. Have you got anything else that you think we should cover before we finish? I mean, we haven't really solved the problem of monogamy and how the human species
crazy that in 2 hours we weren't able to break down and explain to people why they should reconsider it or whatever.
Oh, here we go. See, this white pill is finding God.
Oh, okay. Religiosity and spirituality. I'm glad it wasn't what I thought it was. I thought it was something to do with like race.
Yeah. The Fuentes pill.
And like, I'm hardly even looking to make, if I had like 2 prescriptions to make for people, I would say that like, young people, specifically young men that are feeling socially isolated, you're not going to go from a 2 to a 10 if we're going off of marketplace value overnight, but you can go from a 2 to a 5 to a 6 to an 8, and like be open to that change slowly and work on just having platonic relationships and friendships with people, men and women, like these people who have never had good social interactions are suddenly like, I want a girlfriend tomorrow. And I'm like, do you even have like friends or like a friend group? Do you know how to like socialize with people, be charismatic, be outgoing? You're not going to be able to attract somebody when you're so closed off and reserved, and all of your hobbies are things that are like solo activities,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, people who come for, who want to have help with this stuff, they come from different sort of baselines. And some people are pretty well put together. And there's just something that's kind of getting in the way a little bit socially in terms of the way they're interacting. But there are equally, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of guys who are sort of, they're not really socializing at all, let alone with women. They're not socializing with other guys. They're just not, for whatever reason, they're not adept in that sort of arena. And, those guys need the most help in a way, because you've as you say, you've got to level up. You've got to level up sort of incrementally.
And I can understand it, because more people than ever are doing like, if the places where people typically meet somebody is like a workplace, but if you work remotely, which is becoming more and more common, where you're going to meet people, like then it's going to be incumbent upon yourself to put yourself in social situations, put yourself out there to even engage with strangers and be open to meeting new people.
Yes.
So that's why, like, I'm not surprised that like the person who is doing remote work and then they don't even feel comfortable like hitting on their coworker, because then that could come off as like digital sexual harassment. They're like, okay, well, I still want it to be online, so I'll just go to Tinder. But then they're dissatisfied with Tinder because it's still very superficial engagement with other people.
Well, I mean, there are no easy answers to that kind of thing, really. I mean, except that ultimately, if you really want to change your life, you have to, at some point, you have to think, well, look, it's not going to happen for me living in the middle of nowhere in a town of 3,000 people, and I never leave the house anyway because I'm on the computer all day. I mean, you might have to think, well, look, maybe I do move to a big city for a while. Maybe I do try somewhere else, because there's no magic silver bullet that are going to help people in those really dire situations where they're hardly seeing anybody around them.
Right.
You need to, unfortunately, it's just you need to put yourself. You need to travel a bit. You need to go to places where there are more people and you get more life experience.
Yeah, just get exposure to something that's going to like challenge your worldview, and just get out of your bubble for a bit. And I guess the other thing would be like, I'm really not interested in like dictating or telling people how to date or any of that, but just just be open to more unorthodox arrangements and be like, less outcome oriented and more just like goal oriented towards like, well, I want to like, do I want to like, what is the point of them telling me you need to get married and have kids and the white picket fence and the nuclear family and all of that? It's also implied that that's going to be synonymous with happiness. And I'm like, just
Yes.
ditch the idea that like you have these things are like tied together. Like happiness is going to look a lot different for everybody. So if some of those things look happy and make you happy, then enjoy them, but also be open to, like I do want to be married, but I don't want kids, like that's fine. Like not everybody's meant to be a parent or whatever. So like just like being open to the idea that like happiness can look a lot of different ways, and monogamous relationships and non-monogamy can look a lot of different ways. If you're thinking that it's gonna be the like, babe, it's 4 p.m. time for me to like go, fuck my boyfriend, and you're gonna be like the cuck at home or whatever. It's like that's doesn't have to be the case,
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very bad form to make serious life decisions based on what some content creator on Twitter or on YouTube says. Really, I mean, I think you can get knowledge from all different sources, and I think it's good to take in different people's opinions and things like that. But ultimately, you've got to, I don't know, don't be too swayed just because somebody says, "Oh,
I've got it all figured out."
Yeah.
So because so much of the image that they project him, like, is it that they're so special, or is it that they have money? Like money is going to make even the most average guy, or like they're like, look at this average guy, he can pull all this. I'm like, yeah, but he has money. Like he can, and he's doing content creation. So you don't even know if the people that he has pretending to be his girlfriends are like actually his girlfriends. And I guess that's the problem, is like, I personally would be very hesitant to accept like, paid for like Andrew Tate's dating advice, because with, when the advice is behind the paywall, you can never know if you wasted you have to pay first, and then you can find out if the advice is good or bad,
Yeah, exactly.
That's my issue with it. Like it's not even like, and I feel like if it's the model of like, we need them to keep subscribing, keep coming back, I'm sure it's always built into the advice or the systems that they give, is like, and we'll reveal the one big secret next month. Just resubscribe.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think more unscrupulous people may do that. I mean, personally, for myself, I mean, if I'm working with somebody, I want to make sure that they, they get better at whatever their issue is, and then they don't have to come back. Do you know what I mean?
Right, but you're not. I don't think your services are strictly just advice. You have actual and engagements with people. It would be kind of like if you're offering people like gym memberships. Like at least with the gym, whether or not your client ever even steps foot in it, at least they can like see the gym, they can see that like they could go and do it or whatever. It's up to them to make use of the tools and like the service that they're paying for, as opposed to when the thing is not a service at all, or like where you can see everything, it's just advice. That is what I think is like, I'm like, why are you even listening to this? You don't know if it's going to be good advice or not.
Yeah.
Or you have to pay and then find out, and then you can decide.
So here's a question. I've just thought of this, right? So you're a content creator. You're online. You've got orbiters and people who are, rizzing on you and all that kind of stuff. I mean, presumably, I don't know how many people slide into your DMs and things like this, but I mean, I'm guessing maybe it happens. I mean, what is the cringiest thing? Like, because I think a lot of guys as well nowadays, they are, because they're not maybe socializing as much, they're doing a lot of stuff just digitally, and they're sending messages and DMs and things like that. I mean, what is the cringiest things that guys do? And is that, generally speaking, would you advise guys not to do that, or what's your feeling on it?
There's well, first of all, I mean, like, to avoid cringe is like, good luck. I feel like people need to like part of putting yourself out there is going to have to be accepting rejection, and maybe even being cringy, being outgoing or whatever. So I don't even want people to be so fixated on like, oh, I don't want to come off as cringe or whatever, because it's like they're going to be too scared to even try. Because like, show me somebody who's successful, I'll show you some, like, that is somebody who can accept rejection. Oh
yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's in terms of dating, we always say, I mean, it's rejection is part and parcel of the game. I mean, not everyone's going to be for you. You're not for everybody. It's just, that's how it is.
Right. And like, the sooner that you can accept that, the sooner you can actually start to get better at it, because you're not so attached to like one person's perception of you. It's your confidence is not so fragile. Like, Michael Jordan didn't get good because he only took the shots that he knew he was going to make. He missed 1,000 shots before he made it, So you have to be worth it. But like, part of risk taking should never include just sending a woman a nude unprovoked, or being sexually explicit, or asking for details like personal info too quickly, or this kind of like I think I understand what men are trying to do is that they're like, I don't want to ask a woman to do something. I want to tell her to do it, because they have this idea that like women love assertiveness and like authority. And it's like I think that women do like that sort of confidence, but that has to be earned. You know, if you're just a stranger sliding into my DMs demanding that I give you my number, or I engage with you, I'm like, but why should I? Like, you're just telling me that I should, but you haven't even like demonstrated to me that you're somebody who's like worth my time to do so. So I would say like the cringiest thing is somebody who just says hi, as silly as it sounds, because I'm like, what is enticing about this? Like, if you're messaging me, odds are that like, and somebody who's a public, somewhat of a semi-public figure, you know, it's like, I think I'm like a Humegalol, you know, I'm not even like a micro celebrity. I'm like, I think I'm like basically nobody. I have a very, very small internet presence. And I still have like, there was a point where it slowed down because I hadn't been engaging as much. Discord, I would have like, I would clear my notifications by midnight. The next day I would have 50 notifications from people messaging me for all sorts of different reasons, because they wanted to debate me or like ask questions, or after I said on Fresh and Fit I'd never been on a date, I got more date offers than I'd ever had in my whole life. So
there you go. Did you take any of them up?
What? No, crazy. I did not just agree to meet people in my DMs or whatever, but some were friendlier than others with how they went about it. I also had a barrage of dick pics, because Myron said at the end of it, he was like, send them all dick pics, you know, their socials, and they were like, haha, JK, don't. And I like leaned into the mic and I was like, no, send me, I'll rate your cock. And I actually got a lot of men who took me up on that offer. So but spoiler, anyone who sent me an unsolicited dick pic based off of that, I just sent that their thing was mid. If you asked me to rate it or whatever, everyone was getting like mid. I was not actually going to rate your dick, sorry. Not for free. But yeah, I would say like the cringiest thing is just like hi. It's like, why? That's not engaging to anybody. Why would you just, you know, unless you're just so attractive. But even then, like, I would think that I think that like even just looks alone are not going to be enough to carry you. So if a very attractive man just like slides into your DMs and says hi, and you're looking at a social media presence and you're like, they're hot, but they're boring. They have no personality to them, that they couldn't think of anything to say, you know. And I don't even mean that like there's no pickup line, but there's no personal interest. Like, to me, the people who have been fun and interesting for me to engage with, just purely on like a political level, some sort of like debate or casual conversation, have been people who said hi, they introduced themselves, they said, I saw you on Steven's stream, or like Destiny stream, I saw you on the Fresh and Fit podcast, I saw you debate Sneeko, and you said this, and that stuck out to me, and I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, they had a reason to bring to me, as opposed to somebody who's just saying hi. I'm like, this is somebody who finds me physically attractive, but that's not, are we compatible at all? Did I say anything that's particularly interesting to you? Can you stand to be around me? You know, like, there's plenty of attractive people who they're not interesting to be around because they don't have personality, or we're not interested in the same things. So to me, it's like, establish some sort of basis of a mutual connection or disagreement, and you're going to stand, you'll already be doing way more than the majority of people who are doing it, because it's just a bunch of hi, hello, how are you? It's like, why am I going to divulge to you how my day is going? Why do you even care? You know? Or like, I'm not going to respond to your nude.
Yeah, you got to establish some sort of context. Otherwise, it's just this random. Because, like you say, why would somebody says hi? Why would you? Why bother?
Yeah, like why? Why should I? You know, it's not that I'm just I'm so above it or whatever. But like, I have a limited amount of time in the day, and I'm getting. It's like, if you're sending me hi again, like, there's gonna be 50 other people who have sent me hi. Why should I speak to you out of all and not them?
So you've got to stand out, guys.
And you do, and like,
no dick pics.
Just saying hi. Like, I know that they're trying to be like friendly or something like that. I'm like, but the people who have like trying to establish something personal that they have specifically to talk to me, I don't feel like I was sent a hi along with like 20 other people that night, you know. And it's just like a crapshoot. That was somebody who took time out of their day because they engaged with something critically. They were thinking about it more, and they thought to bring it to me. And I find that to be a lot more compelling and like grounds for interesting conversation, as opposed to just, again, hi, hello, how are you? Undoubtedly friendly, but I'm like, if you can just bring yourself to like cold introduce yourself to people, I'm like, just saying hi works at a bar, you know, that works at a club. That's enough. You don't have to have some personal contact with somebody. If anything, it will be creepy in person. But just hi will be enough to carry you through that social interaction. But the same's not going to apply online. It's just way too easy to contact people. So you're going to have to like, you know, demonstrate like, what is your particular interest with me that you're not just sending this to a bunch of people. Yeah.
Good advice. Good stuff. All right. Well, look, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and hopefully we'll get to do this again at some point soon. Have you got anything coming up, or where can they find you? You've said it already, actually, but if you want to say it again.
Yeah, my @ is the same on basically every platform. I am straighterade or straighterade_ on Twitter, Instagram, Discord. I'm always up for a debate, a conversation. So, and my DMs are open for people who want to engage with those for that reason. Not inviting other people to ask you on a date and stuff like that. It's not that. But yeah, hopefully Troy and I will speak soon on my own live stream, my own channel.
Good stuff. Okay, well, thanks ever so much, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and we will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.